Welcome back to Talk Manga Daily channel. This is part 2 of our Tougen Anki Volume 2 breakdown covering chapters 11 through 15. If you missed part 1 where we broke down chapters 7 through 10, head over to my channel and check it out. We cover the Blood Eclipse powers and some big emotional breakthroughs. Today the story gets even deeper. We'll look at some family trauma, warfront consequences, and a deadly enemy reveal. Let's jump in. Chapter 11, we open up with the intense showdown between Jin and Professor Naito. Jin launches an attack, but the professor stays calm, even taunting Jin while dodging using his rollerblades and weaponized umbrella. That's right, rubber bullets, smoke screens, and slick martial arts. But the fight is more than just action, it's personal. Naito exposes Jin's weaknesses, his injured right arm, and his hot-headed pride. Then comes the real gut punch. Naito casually reveals what he learned while researching Jin. And that big reveal is Jin's father is also a Momotaru. Cue Shinki's shocked reaction. Jin does not deny it. Instead, he explodes. He states, "That piece of shit took everything from me, my family, my dreams. I lived just so I could kill him." The rage, the trauma, it's all there, right on the panel as Jin clenches his fist on the ground and pound the ground. So what we know is that the relationship that Shiki had with his Momotaru father is very different than the relationship Jin had with his. Obviously, we know that Shiki loved his father. His father raised him since he found him as a baby. But Jin's father abused him, took him through all types of trauma. So Shiki's hearing this, and of course, he's thinking, he's just like me, Jin is just like me, raised by a Momotaru. But obviously the relationship, the love is very different than what Jin experienced. And the look on Jin's face on the manga panel shows a deep disdain and distrust and distasteful relationship that his Momotaru father had with him. So we're yet to get more details, but based on the information that was revealed or talked about between Naito and Jin, that Jin was likely abused by his Momotaru father, and we still don't know the exact type of relationship. One of the things we did learn back in chapter 8, when Naito was talking to the principal in the woods, is that only children, when they are taken by Momotaru, they're often treated like lab rats, and they're often abused. So I guess at this point we can only imagine what Jin may have been through. There's just not quite enough detail to say what happened to him. But based on what is revealed between the discussion with Naito and Jin did admit, he was just treated like trash. So, by the time we get to chapter 12, which is the next chapter, Jin is lying on the ground, bruised and restrained. The professor was able to take him down and kind of rope him to a tree. Shiki does make a surprising move. He offers to team up. Jin kind of resists. Pride still too strong, but Shiki hits him with a powerful line. He says to him, "Is your pride really more important than your goals?" He even reveals that his own father was a Momotaru too. Jin doesn't say yes outright, but later when Naito comes looking for Shiki, Jin strikes, a classic anime setup, two rivals forced into a temporary truce. So we get an opportunity to see Jin and Shiki briefly work together to, of course, take down the instructor, because once again, they are in the middle of a game of survival. So in chapter 13, we finally see Shiki and Jin coordinating using a rope made of Jin's own blood. They pull the professor off balance, and of course, he is wearing his rollerblades, which he is very good at fighting with rollerblades on, to include using his own Oni ability and other objects as well. So the teamwork does pay off. Shiki knocks the ball loose and Jin grabs it. But instead of running for personal glory, Shiki yells, "Take it and go for the goal." So at that moment, raw and unselfishness, what Shiki just did stuns even the professor. So Jan starts running, only to pause and reflect on their earlier conversation and turn back and start running back toward Shiki. And he says, "I just refuse to owe anything ever again." He hands the ball to Shiki and tells him to go. So we're seeing both of them. We're seeing Shiki in his selfless way, but of course, Jin being who he is, and he just doesn't want to owe anyone. So he's like, "No, I'm giving this ball back to you. You kind of take it and you go as well." So we do see the difference in their personalities. And that's an interesting take watching these two hand the ball back and forth. And just when Shiki is about to take off and kind of like the dust settles and Shiki decides, "Okay, I'm going to take this ball and run," we meet the Tappy Rapid Messenger. And so what this is a tapir, which of course is an animal carrying a communication box on its back. The message is, "The Kyoto unit is under attack by the Momotaru agency." So what we're getting ready to experience before or see in the manga before going into chapter 14 is that there is this mini war, or there's this mini, let's call it, incident that's happening in Kyoto. So it also demonstrates that no matter where the students are and the professor is as well, that there's a message that can get to them. So, and they were still on the academy school grounds, but it does demonstrate that they have communication mechanisms that can get to the students as well as the professors wherever they are. So at the end of chapter 13, of course, we have this emergency that happens. So the students stop with their survival game, and the students end up having to board a transport to Kyoto. Everyone's energy now has shifted from this schoolyard tag game to a full-blown emergency. We see some hilarious conversation and banter between the remaining students that got introduced in volume 1. Juji, Ikari, Kuina, and even the obnoxious Kiriyama. Naito explains that the Oni agency is split into combat and support units, and they'll be assisting and not fighting when they get to Kyoto. So they'll be a part of what's called the support units. So the students, of course, are getting their orders. There's a little bit of pushback with Shiki and Jin kind of wanting to participate more in the combat piece versus the support piece. But of course, right now, the dark battle that's happening in Kyoto is a battle that, the students aren't quite ready to deal with. So they will be serving the support piece. So what do you know? At this point in the manga, it's a good time to introduce the Momotaru agents. So we get to meet two twisted Momotaru agents, Yomaji and Subakiri. They've slaughtered a squad of Oni agents. I mean, there's a pile of bodies just stacked up of Oni agents. Next, just severed from their bodies, and Subakiri reveals his sick obsession with using Oni bodies for scientific experiments, especially their blood powers, like trying to figure out how their body works, how their blood ability works. So let's just say Subakiri is a little twisted. He makes this morbid statement that says the only value these maggots have is as research material. He says that right before ordering his grotesque beast, which is a augury, to eat a terrified child, Oni child, but also to eat the bodies of the mountain of Oni agents that they just killed. So this piece of the manga is interesting because you get some insight on the Momotaru agents, which was only briefly introduced in volume 1 when Shiki's adopted father had conflict or had the minor combat with Sammy Duray. But it's interesting seeing this dialogue, reading it, and you kind of get an understanding of how the Momotaru view the Onis. So I'd like to look a little bit more at Tsubakiri's character at this point, because he stands out immediately as someone who isn't just dangerous, but like I said, he's deeply twisted. So are Momotaru's villains? Well, they make it seem like the Onis are the ones that's totally out of control, and so they are the ones that need to be taken out. So the best way to describe Tsubakiri is that he takes a scientific and sadist interest in Oni biology. His obsession is academic, but the way he talks about Oni shows an utter disregard for their lives or humanity. Again, we see some dialogue from him that's interesting. And one of the key quotes that he makes, or dialogue pieces, is that the thought of Oni blood is arousing to my inquisitive mind. Their healing abilities, the weapons they fashion out of blood, the way they transform after going berserk. Does it get any better than that? So this isn't someone fighting a war for justice. This is someone who sees Onis as subjects, raw materials for research. He literally calls them maggots, strips them of their dignity, and uses terms like disposable white robes when talking about his experiments. He even mentions how female Oni subjects are more preferable due to their higher pain tolerance and more resilient organs. But what does this tell us about him? Well, it tells the audience he has a long, grotesque track record of testing on them, dehumanizing them. Tsubakiri doesn't just hate Oni, he fetishizes their suffering and transformation. He's twisted. His admiration is clinical but predatory at best. And what makes this even more interesting is that Yomiji, his partner, Momotaru partner that's working with him right now, is clearly uncomfortable with him. She says, "I don't like your research. It gives me the creeps. That was overkill, and it makes cleanup a pain." So it was how he was taking out the Oni agents, holding up their heads, and just tossing them. She's cold as well as a Momotaru agent, but she does not revel in the killing the way that he does. She also seems used to his behavior, which implies the Momotaru agency tolerates it or even enables individuals like him as long as their results are effective. So here's my thought on the Momotaru agency, just kind of like based on Tsubakiri's introduction. And this could totally change as we get through the other volumes, but what does this tell us about the Momotaru agency? Tsubakiri is a walking warning sign about the ideology and moral rot inside of the agency. And this is probably what Shiki's father was seeing, understanding that Oni children are innocent, especially since they haven't awakened their Oni ability as well. But their agents aren't just cold soldiers, aren't all just cold soldiers. Some, like him, see Oni as animals or lab experiments, and others, like Yomiji, and of course, even, I would say again, Shiki's father, might feel uneasy, but still follows orders, making them complicit. But we can say Shiki father never failed in that category either, because he actually saved Shiki when he was a baby, took him and raised him. So the question is the Momotaru a villain agency at this point? Is the Oni a villain as well. So it's kind of too early to tell, but just like any other groups in a story, you know, it appears that the Momotaru agency hands aren't clean either. And I suspect Shiki's father knew that as well. And there are certain practices that he probably disagreed with along the way, didn't take a liking to, which is why he left. But we are now going to jump into the last chapter, and this is chapter 15, where the team arrives at the Kyoto Oni Agency hideout. This hideout, of course, is hidden beneath the Kiyomizuderu Temple. We meet the support unit chief, who is Kiyoya Orizanka, a charismatic doctor with a flirty edge and a reputation for healing even the worst injuries. And this is of course, Oni doctor. But when he walks the students through the triage unit, the tone shifts very fast. Shiki sees the brutal cost of war, dismembered Oni agents, dying comrades, and burnt out fighters. The war between the Oni and Momotaru isn't just training anymore. It's real, and the students are getting a first look at the life-threatening and even the death that comes along with it. Meanwhile, Professor Naito arrives at the front lines. He faces off against Tsubakiri, who's now reanimating corpses with his black bacteria. Of course, the Momotaru, they have a ability as well. They can wield the black bacteria. When Tsubakiri hints at destroying sacred Oni locations, Naito replies with an expressionless response. I know the perfect place for you to start. Hell. So just a few final thoughts from Talk Manga Daily. These final chapters bring out the deeper themes of Tougen Anki that we're able to see so far between Volume 1 and Volume 2, the cost of revenge, the mental burden of trauma, and how pride can be both a shield and a prison. Shiki and Jin do share a moment in Volume 2 where they had to work together. Are they starting to understand each other? I don't know. Stay tuned. It's still slightly just too early to tell, but one thing's for sure, all the students are being thrown into a brutal war. And let's talk about the war. Tougen Anki doesn't shy away from showing what violence really does to people, not just physically, but emotionally. The triage room from chapter 15, I'm certain that was a gut punch for the students. Shiki doesn't say a word, but his face, the shock, the weight, it says everything. He's beginning to realize that, again, this isn't a game and it's not just about personal revenge. There's a long-standing war between Oni and the Momotaru, and it's been chewing people up long before Shiki and Jin ever picked up a weapon or became a weapon, or their blood became a weapon. That wraps up our full breakdown of Volume 2. If you haven't already, check out Part 1 where we covered chapters 7 through 10. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Tougen Anki, the Volume 3 breakdown will be coming soon right here on Talk Manga Daily. Catch you next time.